Imagine a world where every season brought wild feasts, colorful parades, and music echoing through cobblestone streets. From harvest dances to winter revelries, medieval festivals were the ultimate escape from daily life. Throughout medieval history, festivals were not just an excuse to indulge in merrymaking. They were pivotal in structuring the lives of the people. These celebrations marked the passage of time, celebrated religious observances, honored nature's cycles, and created much-needed spaces for communal joy. In a world dominated by agricultural labor, harsh winters, and social divisions, festivals provided respite and reinforced the bond between individuals and their community. The rhythm of the seasons was the rhythm of life itself, and each festival brought with it a sense of renewal, hope, and gratitude. From winter's reflective stillness to the energetic celebrations of summer, medieval festivals were an expression of both joy and necessity. The festivals often reflected the seasonal cycle, with spring and summer marking times of planting and harvesting, while autumn and winter were times of thanksgiving and reflection. Some festivals were religious in nature, celebrating saints, Christ, or key moments of Christian doctrine. Others were purely secular, often centered around the harvest and the changing of the seasons. Today, we'll journey through the medieval year, exploring the vibrant festivals that celebrated life, death, and everything in between. We'll uncover the deep connection medieval people had with their faith, nature, and community, how they navigated the harshness of life with music, dance, and feasting. By exploring these traditions, we'll also discover how they shaped not just the medieval year, but our understanding of history and the continuity of human culture. As the days grew shorter and the weather turned cold, winter festivals provided warmth, light, and joy for medieval people. The long, dark nights brought a sense of quiet reflection, a time to retreat into one's home or monastery and connect with others through shared rituals and celebrations. One of the most important winter festivals was Christmas, the celebration of the birth of Christ. For medieval Christians, this was the holiest time of the year, where church services were filled with hymns and prayers, and the family gathered for feasts and exchanges of gifts. Christmas Eve marked the beginning of the Christmas celebration, with midnight mass being one of the most significant services of the year. The church, adorned with candles and incense, would be packed with people celebrating Christ's birth in the warmth of the church, a sharp contrast to the harsh, cold world outside. After Mass, families gathered around the hearth, where the feast began. Roast meats, fruit pies, and wine flowed freely. Even for the poorest, the season was an opportunity to find warmth and solace in community, with the exchange of small gifts and well-wishing. Following Christmas was New Year's Day, a moment of reflection and renewal. This was a time for making vows, both personal and communal, to seek good fortune in the coming year. Medieval people believed that the first day of the year set the tone for the months to come, and so it was customary to visit neighbors, offer blessings for health and prosperity, and partake in feasts to mark the occasion. The holiday season wasn't complete without the Feast of Epiphany on January 6th, which commemorated the arrival of the three wise men. In some parts of Europe, Twelfth Night was celebrated, marking the end of the Christmas festivities. This was a time of feasting, masked balls, and merrymaking, an event that would set the stage for the rest of the winter and mark the end of the festive season. Winter celebrations also had a spiritual dimension, offering time for penitence, rest, and preparation for the year ahead. While people might have enjoyed the festivities, there was also a deep sense of reverence, symbolized by the solemnity of the church services and the quiet moments spent with loved ones by the fire. As the frost melted and the first flowers of spring began to bloom, medieval people welcomed spring festivals with open arms. After the cold and isolation of winter, the arrival of spring was a time of renewal, growth, and gratitude. The seasonal shift from winter to spring was deeply felt in medieval society, and the festivals celebrated during this time reflected the vitality of the earth coming back to life. One of the most iconic spring celebrations was May Day, celebrated on May 1st. This festival marked the beginning of the growing season and was a time to honor the earth's fertility. Villages would decorate a maypole, a tall wooden pole adorned with flowers and ribbons, and people would dance around it in elaborate patterns. The dances were often performed by young men and women, symbolizing the union between the land and the people who depended on it. May Day also included festivals of music and games, where townsfolk would come together to enjoy the arrival of warmer days. Alongside May Day, there was the ancient Celtic festival of Beltane, celebrated at the same time, which marked the beginning of the growing season. Large bonfires were lit to symbolize the power of the sun, and people would dance around these flames to ensure fertility and protection for their livestock. The fire was seen as a purifying force, warding off evil spirits and bringing prosperity to the land. The joyous spirit of Beltane was celebrated with feasts, dancing, and the wearing of floral crowns. Another significant festival during this period was Easter, which celebrated the resurrection of Christ. For medieval Christians, Easter was the culmination of the Lenten season, a time of fasting and penitence. Easter Sunday was a day of feasting, with meat and wine in abundance, and the church service was filled with joy and celebration. In medieval Europe, Easter also symbolized the renewal of life, which was reflected in the springtime agricultural rituals and the return of the warm weather. Spring was also a time to honor the patron saints of the period. St. George's Day, celebrated on April 23rd, was especially significant in England. St. George was the patron saint of England, and his feast day was marked by parades, tournaments, and feasts. In towns across England, people would gather in the streets to celebrate, and knights would engage in jousting matches to commemorate the valor and chivalry associated with St. George. Springtime festivals were also a time for renewal in the lives of medieval people. It was the season for planting crops, and the celebrations around these festivals reflected a deep connection to the land, the seasons, and the cycles of nature. Summer, with its long days and abundant crops, was a time of great celebration in medieval Europe. It marked the peak of the growing season, the height of the sun's power, and the time when farmers and townsfolk could see the fruits of their labor begin to ripen. Summer festivals were filled with joyous feasting, dancing, and tournaments. One of the most significant summer celebrations was Midsummer, celebrated around the summer solstice. The festival marked the peak of the sun's power and the beginning of the long, hot days of summer. Communities would gather around bonfires, sing songs, dance, and participate in merrymaking. In some regions, people would jump over bonfires to ensure fertility and good fortune for the coming year. The lighting of the midsummer fires symbolized the power of the sun and was seen as a way to protect the harvest from pests and disease. Lammas Day, celebrated on August 1st, marked the first of the harvests and was a time for thanksgiving and feasting. This was the festival of the grain harvest, when people would bake bread from the first crops and share it with their families and neighbors. Lammas was celebrated with large communal meals, often accompanied by music, dancing, and games. St. John's Day, celebrated on June 24th, was another summer festival of great significance. It was marked by the lighting of St. John's fires, which were bonfires burned on hilltops. The celebration was meant to honor the saint and purify the land before the harvest season. People would gather around these fires, sing songs, and dance. The festival's connection to light and fire symbolized the power of the sun and its role in bringing the crops to maturity. Summer also brought opportunities for knightly tournaments. The most famous of these were the jousting tournaments, where knights from across the kingdom competed in games of skill and strength. These events were social as much as they were competitive, drawing large crowds and providing entertainment for the nobility and commoners alike. The tournaments were followed by feasts and celebrations, where the victors were praised and honored. Summer festivals in medieval Europe were filled with light, music, and energy, reflecting the bounty of the earth and the happiness that came with the growing season. As the year began to wind down, autumn brought a time of reflection, thanksgiving, and preparation. The harvest had been completed, and the people of medieval Europe gathered to give thanks for the bounty of the earth, to share with others, and to prepare for the long winter months ahead. The most important autumn festival was Harvest Festival, which was celebrated across Europe. This festival marked the end of the harvest season, when communities gathered to thank God for the crops and to pray for a good winter. The day was filled with feasts, games, and music. In rural communities, people would bring the first fruits of their harvest to the local church to be blessed before being shared among the villagers. One of the most iconic autumn festivals was All Hallows' Eve, celebrated on October 31st, originally a Celtic festival known as Samhain. This festival marked the end of the harvest and the beginning of winter. It was believed that the veil between the living and the dead was thinnest at this time of year, and so people lit bonfires, offered sacrifices, and donned costumes to ward off evil spirits. Over time, Halloween evolved into a Christian celebration, but many of the ancient traditions remained. St. Martin's Day, celebrated on November 11th, was another important autumn festival, particularly in France and Germany. St. Martin, the patron saint of winemakers, was honored with large feasts and wine-tasting events. It was also the time when farmers stored their harvests for the winter, making it a festival of both thanksgiving and preparation for the cold months ahead. Autumn festivals were a time to reflect on the year's work, to give thanks, and to prepare for the winter. They were a moment of rest before the harsh cold and a celebration of the community's resilience. Throughout the medieval year, festivals were far more than just moments of indulgence. They were a reflection of the rhythms of nature, the community's connection to the earth, and the cycle of life itself. From the quiet introspection of winter to the exuberant celebrations of summer, medieval festivals provided both a respite from hard labor and a means of renewing the spirit. These festivals were opportunities for people to come together, to give thanks, to celebrate, and to prepare for the seasons ahead. They reinforced the community, fostered a sense of shared history, and connected people to their faith and the natural world around them. As we look back on these medieval traditions, we are reminded of the deep sense of community, faith, and joy that people found in the cycles of nature. Though the seasons may change, the need for celebration, reflection, and togetherness remains as timeless as the medieval festivals themselves.